Hello, my name is John Burris. I want to welcome you to this short video called Pilates is Not Yoga. In this short video, I'll be explaining a lot of anatomy principles that perhaps most people aren't taught in school and show you the main differences between yoga and Pilates. And there might be some disturbing things that I share with you because a lot of our culture, in my opinion, is moving the wrong way. So full disclosure is I've taken Pilates classes and I've taken a lot of yoga classes, so I'm very familiar with both aspects. They're very different and very unique in their principles, and they're essentially moving in different directions. Full disclosure, I have been a yoga teacher for over 30 years, and my preference is the yoga world, of course, but I have been in the fitness world the first part of my life, so I completely understand that world as well. So there's really a lot of differences, and in this video I'll be sharing with you a lot of those distinctions and differences and show you perhaps more concepts about your body that you haven't been taught so far. So once again, I have taken a lot of yoga and I've taken some Pilates, but I am primarily a yoga teacher and that is my preference. So Pilates emerged several decades ago by Joseph Pilates, and he used his method to heal dancers from injuries. And one of his philosophies was he based on yoga principles. So it has its roots in yoga, but it's completely different. Where yoga, there's so many different variations of yoga, from fast to slow to seated to standing poses to all kinds of meditation and whatnot. So it's a very, very broad spectrum. So we're not just talking about one thing. But primarily the yoga experience is moving in a completely different way that the Pilates experience is moving. Yoga, we don't really know its roots for sure. Some people say it's been hundreds or thousands of years in the making. Started in India and traveled west and all throughout the world. So those two systems seem to be colliding right now. And I find it really disturbing that the trend going on, and I will talk a little bit more about that down the road. One thing I find crazy is how Pilates came to be taught in yoga studios. It was almost like a cash grab. When I was teaching in yoga studios, all of a sudden Pilates showed up and it grew and grew, and more students, and eventually, at least in the studios I taught in, it took over the yoga classes. It was disturbing to watch because essentially yoga is a heart-based principles where you're opening your heart, you open up your energy, you open up your emotions, you open up your arms and legs and shoulders, and you're expanding. It's called an expansive exercise system. Pilates is more of a war experience. It's contractive. It hardens and deadens your body. It tries to numb out your sensation. And now all of a sudden it's like you're teaching this experience in a yoga studio, and it's like oil and water. They just don't mix, and the entire vibe or clientele changed quite a bit because of that transformation. So it's almost like there's a time and place for everything. So why would you want to cook dinner in the bathroom? Why would you want to park your car in the living room? So I found that the introduction of Pilates studios and Pilates classes into yoga studios was quite alarming, and I'll talk about that a little bit later when I talk about the nervous system. So if you want to take Pilates classes, I think it's better to take it at a gym or a Pilates studio. To have mixed classes with yoga and Pilates in the same center, it's really a disservice to everybody because you're moving in different directions and you have different beliefs about your body in each system, and your bodies are moving in completely different ways. So let's first talk about health or fitness. We often lump that together, health and fitness. It's not the same. Pilates is more of a fitness practice, and fitness is more aligned with the cosmetic world of shaping your body to look a certain way. Tuck your tummy in tight, harden, glue yourself together, lose weight. Fitness is more designed to shape your body. Yes, there are health benefits of fitness. Lots of things can happen. Blood pressure can drop, weight loss and whatnot. But fitness is primarily designed as a cosmetic experience, and Pilates is a lot of that too. About toning your body, shaping your body, And it's part of the fitness practice that we've all come to embrace in our culture, that a hard body, the hardness is health concept. We have to harden our bodies and look a certain way in our bikini bathing suits. So that's part of the Pilates experience. It's more of a fitness practice. Yoga is quite different. Yes, there's fitness involved. You can be quite fit practicing yoga, but it's a lot of health experiences. You're opening up your channels, I call them the 13 rivers of health, your circulatory system, your lymphatic system, your chi flow that moves through the fascia, your emotional systems. You're opening up all your systems because you're an expansive practice. Your breathing is incredibly important. Half of the yoga experience, in my opinion, is just breathing. Learning how to breathe through your nose slows your breath down, slows your mind down, puts you in a parasympathetic layer response, which is the relaxation response. So while there are fitness benefits to yoga, a lot of the experience is health. And so when you have Pilates and yoga in the same place, you're contrasting each other. Once again, like I said, oil and water, they're really completely different intentions. And when we talk about aging, people who primarily practice fitness, hardening their body, which includes Pilates, and then people who practice primarily yoga, which is expansive movements, softening your fascia, lengthening, open up your chi flow, going to have completely different aging experiences. The hard body doesn't age very well. So the Pilates body won't age as well as the yoga body because hardness is death to your tissue. A hard body is a dried out beef jerky body. That's what the Pilates experience is promoting. The yoga body is more of an expansive body that has life to it, energy, circulation. Your tissues are healthier because you're warming them up and you're lengthening like you're pulling taffy, and you're expanding in your body. Your joints will remain freer, more open. So it's a completely different aging experience as well. So the next part is called the core experience. So Pilates, essentially, a lot of the premises are based around the abdomen, the core. So just as another side fact here, there are a few things I like in Pilates. There are probably 20% of Pilates I would call expansive movement. Movements that are on the reformer are expanding your joints and limbs and whatnot. 80% of Pilates I disagree with. I call it contractive movements that I don't agree with. So there are certain parts I like about it. But the premise of Pilates is to harden your core. Tighten your core. Everything is designed around hardening your core. There are so many problems with that philosophy. It's a false narrative. Your core does not hold you up. Your abdominal muscles, your lower abdominal muscles, do not support your back. By tightening your abdominal muscles and all the obsessive core work that Pilates does, you're actually making your back tighter. I can't tell you how many private clients I see who do Pilates who have back issues and neck issues and hip issues because they're hardening and tightening and blowing out their bodies. So that's my personal experience with it. I'm alarmed, and they don't want to leave their Pilates class because that's where all their friends are. And I tell them your Pilates class is causing you to have that stiff neck or that tight back, and they won't leave because they're addicted to it. But the core work it's an obsession. And it's a wrong ideology. It's not really how the body works at all. It's a false analogy. Where in the yoga practice, yeah, there are a lot of yoga teachers who teach core work, and I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's how they teach. It's about expansion, expression, opening things up, lengthening. It's about moving the layers away from each other like taffy stretching. So the core premises of Pilates are to tighten and harden the core, and the core premises of yoga to expand and lengthen the center of the body and all the different parts. They're moving in completely opposite directions. The human body is built in layers and tubes, like a tree, in the rings of a tree. So the human body has layers on the outside moving inward to essentially a real core, which is more the spine and the energy centers of the center of the body. When you're practicing Pilates, you're gluing all those layers together. You're fusing all the layers around your center together. You're hardening and tightening and fusing together because you have a false analogy that was taught to us by, I don't know who, media personalities probably, that we need to harden our bodies to protect our center. Well, you don't. Where the yoga practice is trying to loosen and lengthen, expose all those layers and free them up. That's a big distinction there. And here's a picture of a depiction of a person from a concept by a book called Emotional Anatomy by Stanley Kellerman. And this is the layers of the body and how we're a series of tubes and layers and rings. In the Pilates experience, you're trying to contain and tighten and harden those layers. So all that energy at the center gets squashed and shut down. Where in the yoga experience, you're trying to open, expand all the layers, where you're trying to free up all that energy at the center. It's called the kundalini, or the life force, or sometimes people call it the soul of the body. And the center of the body is full of energy. That's why yoga is more of a spiritual practice. It's life force energy, and then all the center of these swirling balls of energy and chakras will revolve around that center core. So this center called kundalini rides through your center. Well, the Pilates experience tries to shut down the energy. It's like taking your nuclear reactor in your body and shutting it down. So in Pilates, you're trying to kill your energy field. Where in yoga, you're trying to expand, express, and open it up. It's a quite different experience. So let's say this is the center of your spine. The Pilates philosophy is your spine needs to be protected by hard, tight abdominal muscles. That's not true. That doesn't need to be happening, because essentially your spine is held up by layers of fascia tissue. And fascia is like the wrapping around the orange and all the insides of the orange, the white stuff of the orange. So it's all the fascia in there. And the fascia carries the energy fields of the body. So this life force energy moves through the fascia tissue. And it has all this brilliant energy to it. And when you're practicing yoga, you're expanding the fascia, you're lengthening the fascia like these cords, and you're opening up all the fields of energy. Where in Pilates, you're trying to shut it down. You're trying to create a situation where you harden, tighten, and dry out your fascia, which lets the energy dissipate. It goes away because you're now hard and dried out. So that's a lot of the core distinctions between Pilates and yoga. In yoga, you're trying to expand the energy field in the center of the body, where the kundalini rises. In Pilates, you're trying to shut it down. And it's kind of disturbing, actually, when people don't know what they're doing. And this is a depiction of a picture from a concept by Thomas Myers, who wrote a book called Anatomy Trains. This is called the superficial front line of the body. And this is all fascia tissue that runs from your pubic bone all the way up through your chest and up into your neck. Well, in the Pilates experience, you're shortening this line of fascia. You're causing the chest to cave in, the abdominals to shorten. You're causing the neck to tighten. And you're shortening this entire line. Here's a picture of students doing core work in Pilates. They're shortening their front line of their body and their core work. They're shortening their abdominals, shortening their chest muscles, shortening their neck. They're becoming tighter, harder, stiffer, and more dried out. This is the common Pilates experience. In contrast, this is the yoga experience. You're lengthening the front line of the body in other areas. You're getting space and flow and openness and energy opening into the pubic bone, into the chest and the shoulders, the heart. This is a heart opening practice, where Pilates is a heart closing practice. It's an abdominal closing practice. In yoga, you're creating space. It's called an expansive movement system. In Pilates, you're trying to deaden the body from feeling. And here's another back bend picture. Once again, you're creating length and space from your psoas muscle and your groin through your neck and shoulders and heart. You're releasing your neck. You're not shortening it. You're creating space across your heart and lungs. Completely different than a Pilates experience. So we've seen how the yoga experience and the Pilates experience are moving the bodies in completely different directions. Pilates is about tightness, hardness, deadening the body. It's part of the fitness world of war exercise, where we're designing our bodies to harden and deadened sensation. In the yoga world, we're open the body up to energy flow and circulation and lymphatic flow and emotion and freeing up your joints. It's a completely different direction each practice is heading. So now we'll talk about how the mind is different in Pilates as well as in the yoga experience. So essentially there's two really old nervous systems in our body that are reptilian. They're at our base of our root of our brain. We have the sympathetic nervous system, which is your stress response, which is when you're at war, you're trying to survive and fight off whatever that enemy or perceived enemy is. Then you have your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your relaxation response. The Pilates experience primarily keeps you in a sympathetic nervous response, which is a stress response, where the yoga experience primarily keeps you in a parasympathetic nervous response, which is your relaxation response. We have two very distinct nervous systems. So the sympathetic nervous response is your war response. You're at war. Your body's being filled with cortisone and testosterone and adrenaline. You're preparing for battle. You're hardening your body in preparing for battle. That's the Pilates experience. So when you're in a yoga practice, because we teach yoga students to breathe through your nose, which creates a relaxation response, and then there's a 5 to 10 minute shavasana or rest period at the very end. Most students, now I don't have any scientific data to show this, but this is my observation. When people leave a Pilates class, they might feel satisfied that they survived it. So there's a sense of satisfaction, but they also feel tired, hard, tight, and they're also pumped up on adrenaline. They're pumped up on cortisol. They're stressed out because they've been in their sympathetic nervous response, their war stance, where most people, in my experience, when they leave a yoga class, they're in their parasympathetic nervous response, which is their relaxation response. They'd rather go out and sit around and talk to people rather than run to their next endeavor. Their body is in relaxation response after practicing yoga because of the way the yoga process works. It's a really different state to be in. This is why I never agree that Pilates should be taught with yoga at yoga studios. So what I noticed over the years of Pilates being introduced was that students became more agitated. They weren't as relaxed. They were louder, noisier. The yoga studios lost their calm vibe because Pilates was introduced, because you introduced war into a relaxed state. It was like bringing loud, noisy people into a day spa. There's a contrast, oil and water. So remember that the way we were taught to move our bodies started 1,000 years ago in war, the old Olympics, and we do it today. It's all war-based. Harden your body, defeat the enemy, conquer, shorten, tighten, harden. That's all war-based. So now you brought war-based mentality into a calm Zen experience. It really doesn't work, and people don't realize it, but it became a money grab for many studios of yoga, and it's a shame that it happened, but that's what happened, and it's still there. That's why I believe if you want to practice Pilates, it should be at a gym or a place designed for Pilates where you're in a war already with your body and not in a Zen experience like the yoga experience. So that's just my interpretation of what's happened in the world. So a lot of what happens in our bodies isn't just muscle. It's your fascia is a big part of how we exercise, and most people have little to no information on fascia because we don't teach about it. In fact, medical doctors and scientists know very little about it. It's one of the primary concepts of why yoga works so well, because the fascia is a surrounding around the muscles, and you're lengthening and expanding the fascia, and that's where the energy flows. So there's a concept that happens called hydrogen bonding. And when you harden your muscles over time, you glue the fascia together. The molecules actually fuse together and dry out. It becomes hard and brittle like beef jerky. So hydrogen bonding is the process of gluing yourself together. Well, that's what fitness does over time, and Pilates is part of that. You're actually gluing yourself together. On the other hand, there's a concept called thixotropy, which is unleashing the molecules and expanding, like warming taffy and lengthening it. And that's what yoga is doing. Chemically, you're actually warming the fascia up, and you're expanding it and lengthening it, and you're getting space. So it's another chemical process going on. So really, two different chemistries going on in the body between Pilates and yoga. In Pilates, you're following the fitness practice of hardening, tightening, shortening, called hydrogen bonding, where everything's gluing together. And in yoga, you're practicing what's primarily called thixotropy, which is you're lengthening, expanding, warming, and opening. Completely different ways to move the body. Hydrogen bonding is when the tissues glue together. And this primarily happens in the fitness experience, of which Pilates is part of that. Thixotropy is the chemical process of warming the fascia up and separating the bonds and unleashing the hardness in the body. And this is what primarily makes yoga effective. So this is a picture of a Pilates exercise here. You're tightening, hardening, shortening. You're contracting the body. It's part of the war experience. You're trying to get hard and tight. And this is the difference between Pilates and yoga. And in the yoga experience, you're trying to get loose and long, which is completely different. You're trying to expand your fascia muscles, creating space in your joints, length in your sides. You don't want to contract, you want to expand into your body. As you expand in the yoga practice, you're opening up the fascia tissue, which frees up the energy fields, the chi running through the fascia. And this is directly opposite to the fitness practice, of which Pilates is, where you're closing down your fascia system, closing down your energy field by drying out your fascia and hardening your body. Completely different systems. So let's talk about the breathing. Each practice had different breathing concepts. You know, most of us don't know how to breathe. I mean, it's sad to say, but we take shallow breaths. So in the perfect world, 75% of your breathing should come from your diaphragm, and then another 15 to 25% from your rib cage and then upper chest. Well, most people in the Western culture only breathe from the upper chest. You know why? Because their diaphragm is so tight from their abdominal work, their diaphragm can't move. So when you do yoga, you're breathing through your sides. You're breathing through your front, you're breathing through your back, you're expanding. In the yoga practice, we're attempting to what's called ujjayi breath, which is breathing through your nose, which relaxes the nerve in your nose, go right to your brain. So you're more likely, as I talked about before, to leave the class relaxed because you're relaxing your mind through your breathing technique. Where in the Pilates experience, it's a chaotic breath. That chaotic breath is a breath of stress. It's creating a stress experience, a panic attack in your body. And it primarily comes from your upper chest. So the breathing experiences are completely opposite. One is creating a stress response, and one is creating a relaxation response. And that's why people's nervous systems are completely different when you leave a Pilates class or you leave a yoga class. So this is where our breathing gets really interesting. Your diaphragm is here, and it's attached to your lungs and your heart. And ideally, when you breathe, you're supposed to breathe out with the diaphragm. When you inhale, it goes down and out. When you exhale, it comes back in, and that creates space for the lungs to move air in and out, and the heart to move. But most people don't know how to breathe because their diaphragm doesn't move. At least most people in Western culture. And that causes significant problems. And when you put a layer of hard muscles on top of the diaphragm, now your diaphragm. So here's a depiction of the human anatomy torso here. Diaphragm is here, heart is here, lungs are here. So what's supposed to happen when you inhale, your diaphragm pulls down and it stretches your lungs and your heart. And when your diaphragm releases, it pulls back up, stretches the lungs, and pushes everything back out. So that's how it's supposed to work. Inhaling, diaphragm moves down and out, stretches the lungs, stretches the heart, stretches all that. So diaphragm moves the lungs and moves the heart. That's how things are supposed to happen. However, when you're engaged in all these fitness practices like Pilates, you put a hard layer of muscles around your diaphragm. All that core work you're doing, you build a wall of hard tissue so your diaphragm doesn't move. So you have to end up breathing from the upper chest, which is the stress breath. So here's the interesting thing about that. So in part of my research, there's a woman named Donna Farhi, F-A-R-H-I, who wrote a book called The Breathing Book. And she quoted many scientific studies that said, taking a group of men who had heart attacks, and they all breathed from their upper chest because their diaphragm was locked in place and their core was too hard. So the implication is that when you do core work, you're adding extra stress on your heart, because when the diaphragm moves, it's supposed to massage the heart. And the heart's supposed to get a massage every time your diaphragm moves. But guess what's happening? Diaphragm moves down, heart stretches, and heart is healthier when the diaphragm moves. But if you're doing all that core work, your diaphragm doesn't move, and your heart doesn't get that stretch. So the scientific studies that she's quoting says perhaps a reason people are having heart attacks, or one of the reasons, was because their core is too tight. And so look at all the fitness practices practicing core work. So just something to think about. So here's another anatomy issue. Most people are taught what's called old anatomy, that's hundreds of years old, and we're still doing it. So what I'm sharing with you is new anatomy. Your spine doesn't hold you up. So the Pilates concept is harden your core to support your spine, support your back. That's a lie. That's not how the body actually works. That's a 400-year-old lie. But the Pilates practices teaches that philosophy. So we don't want that. So the yoga philosophy is a little bit different. And not all yoga teachers teach this, but I teach this. So your spine is here, and it's connected to the fascia network and the muscle network. And when the muscles and the fascia around the spine are too tight, they pull it down. They compress it, and it starts to harden, and you lose space in your disc because the fascia and the muscles around the vertebrae are pulling it down. So in the yoga practice, what we're trying to do is stretch the fascia and muscles so the spine gets space and length, and it's not compressed. When you do core work, you're actually compressing the spine. So if this is the front of your body and this is the back of the body, and you see people doing back work and core work, they're pulling their body down and they're compressing their spine, thinking they're curing it. You're making it worse. So the Pilates experience makes your back worse because it tightens your front, tightens your back, where the yoga experience, we're lengthening the fascia and muscle tissue, creating space in the vertebrae. It's a completely different system. So the system being taught today in old anatomy is called the block theory, that teaches us that the body is a series of blocks all stacked on top of each other, and we need to strengthen the blocks. Well, that's how buildings are built. That's not human beings at all. Human beings move around. Buildings are built this way. But the Pilates experience teaches us we're a series of blocks that need to be contained and hardened and locked down, because that's what the fitness model is teaching. That's an anatomy lie. The body doesn't work that way, but that's how we're taught. Instead, we're a series of cables and pulleys, and this is called a tensegrity model. We're a series of cables and pulleys pulling in all different directions. And that's what holds us up. The tension in the fascia holds us up. And the more you lengthen it and stretch it, the more you're held upright, not tightening everything back down. So Pilates is trying to tighten everything down, and yoga is trying to expand and loosen and tone everything. And they're completely different, opposite directions. And here's how you have two completely different models. On this side, we have the fitness model, which is Pilates. You're trying to harden the body, tighten the body, bring it into compression, hardening, tightening, because you believe the body is a series of blocks. In this model over here is the yoga model. We're trying to expand and lengthen everything because we believe that we want strength through tone, through length, through expansion. And the body is supported by balanced length, not by hardened blocks. So tensegrity over compression. Another aspect I like to talk about is consciousness versus unconsciousness. In my experience with yoga, the practice is trying to make me more conscious of my body, more space. When I'm in a pose, I'm examining where am I holding, what am I feeling, what is holding me back here, what's the level of pain, what are my emotions saying to me, how do I sit with this uncomfortableness and without running away. Yet in the fitness world, which is what Pilates is about deadening your body's sensation. Just drive through it. Just do it. Drive through it. Don't feel anything. Just drive through it. Numb yourself out. So in yoga, in my experience, we're trying to make the whole person more conscious. In the Pilates experience, we're trying to deaden the person from consciousness. Completely different ways of thinking in the world. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in a yoga class I've either broken down in tears or a student is broken down, sobbing uncontrollably because we're opening up pockets of dark traumas and wounds in the body that are being exposed, where I've never seen anybody cry in a Pilates class or in the gym unless you drop a 100-pound weight on your toe because you're trying to deaden your body. So in my experience, you're trying to bring life to the body with yoga, and you're trying to deaden the body with Pilates. And they're really different. I know my Pilates friends and teachers might not want to hear me say that because they think they're doing the right things. I've been in both worlds, and I'm telling you, the yoga world is such a better experience, but the media and all the celebrities and all the hype are trying to take people in the wrong direction. And so I'm just giving you a suggestion of my experience between both fitness and yoga. They are really completely different. So once again, there's a whole different mindset, a gym mentality versus a spirit mentality. I've belonged to gyms my whole life. I can tell you it's about weights thrown around and loud music and people grunting and pushing and all kinds of work. And I've been in the yoga world for over 30 years myself. It's a completely different world of, yes, people work hard, and there's a sense of strife sometimes, but it's a completely different vibe between the gym mentality and the spirit mentality. And at this point in my life, I certainly would prefer the spirit mentality much greater. I believe that the Pilates experience of the last 10 years have actually been a disservice to our society because we're teaching our bodies to be in war. Remember, the root base of warrior is war, and athletes are warriors. So people going into their Pilates class are essentially engaging in war, and they're hardening, tightening their bodies, and it shows up in the rest of their life, in their stress response and whatnot. So I'm making this video to share with people who would like to hear, this is my experience, and I'm not saying don't go do Pilates. I just want people to be informed of what they've signed up for. So once again, 20% of Pilates I can agree with. 80% I don't agree with. But I would much prefer if we started doing yoga when we were 5 years old and stopped the core work and the push-ups and the pull-ups, and we'd be a whole different society as we grew up. So thank you for watching this short video. I've hoped I've given you some information to use and maybe change your mind about how you take care of your body. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to know more about me, please follow me at my website, johnburris.com. And please be sure to subscribe to my channel here for more leading edge videos to come. Thank you.